thank you for joining us on The Skeptic Psychic, where we delve into ancient societies, the ghosts, the paranormal, UFOs, all looking at it from the perspective of the true believer and from the skeptic perspective. Joining me, my partner, my co-host, my sibling, Kimber Rodriguez. Myself, I am Richard Gregg. And again, let's look into being the skeptic psychic.
Hello, how you doing tonight? And welcome once again to the Skeptic Psychic. And now we are talking in the future. How are you doing, Kim?
I'm doing good. How are you this week?
Doing fine.
That's good. Anything exciting happen on your end of the things?
Well, I've been losing weight. I am working towards defeating my diabetes. Yes, applause, applause, applause. Uh, Working hard and hardly working and doing a lot of driving. In fact, I drove up to Al's favorite place.
Yes, I heard you went to Albuquerque. What was that like?
It was Albuquerque.
Did you
Kind
turn
of.
left?
Yes, I did, in fact.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is to get to Albuquerque, you have to turn left.
Right.
It actually, you're going down I-10 and it tells you turn left to go to Albuquerque.
Yes. Yes, I
So,
found a nice little national park right smack dab in the well, about a block down from where I was supposed to take care of some business. So it was really cool.
now somebody had told me that there's a part of Albuquerque called Old Town.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to be a very interesting place if you're sensitive.
Okay.
So,
Nah, just it said I found a national park. It was really nice.
uh, yes. Well, hopefully in a few months I can take a trip that way and we can check out some of those cool places. Maybe drive up to Roswell, drive to Ruidoso down. I think Shauna would like that because I've got if it's like it was last time we went, remember how they had the little marketplace that was very small and they had all the cute little shops and stuff when
Mm-hmm.
we went. I think Shauna would enjoy that.
Yes.
If
And also, I still think we should go back to Lincoln, go back to
Oh, and see,
Fort Sumter and see if Bob's still there.
yeah, I don't think it was
Uh,
Fort Sumner. It was the old jail.
yeah.
The old jail, yeah. But we are off topic. What are we
Yes.
talking about tonight?
Well, I guess we are on topic because we are talking about Ghost Stories of the Wild West, Part 2.
This is true. This is
Yes.
true.
Let me just get that little 3D effect in there. All right, so 2 thumbs up for that. Now, back in early 2022, we shared a few spooky stories over a campfire where coyotes yipped and the winds moaning like the poor souls crawling all the way back from the days of the wild, wild west. Seems we done promised we had so many stories that we'd have to revisit this dusty trail again at some point. Now, looks like at this time for more ghoulies and ghosties is now. But don't you worry none. We still have plenty more house left unplumbered. So let it be a less more time and here at nights around the old campfire to warm your cozy hands and chill your souls. Still coming in the future. Links to that previous episode will be in our
We'll go here.
we'll go here. We'll go here.
Yes, somewhere here.
Here. Or over there. Or maybe over there. Or it could
Or
be
it
up
might be
there.
up here.
Yep. Or it might be that side. Or it might be smack dab in the middle. But we truly did spend some time with some wily villains and poor souls that left in their wake. So how about we start off tonight with a real bang as we sidle up under the protection of the military fort and sit under those soldiers with guns keeping us scary things at bay.
Yes, so first off, let's start with Fort Riley, which is located in Kansas. Now, this was erected way back in 1852. However, back then it wasn't called Fort Riley. You see, originally it was slap dab in the middle of the area, I guess of the
Mm-hmm.
state. So they called it the center, I'm sorry, Camp Center. Now, the powers that be named it properly before a full year had even passed. And this was to honor a local general who had recently died in the line of duty. The fort's purpose was to protect the pioneers and the traders that were headed to Oregon, California, and Santa Fe through the trails. So there was a lot of people who came in with throughout the years through this fort. Now, some familiar names that you people might be aware of are Wild Bill Hickok.
Yeah.
And he spent some time at the fort as a scout. And this was long before his days. I'm sorry, long before his date with Destiny at that poker table down in
Now,
Deadwood.
interesting to note. I know I'm interrupting to you, but the term "a dead man's hand," which is aces and eights, was spurned by Wild Bill Hickok because that was his hand when he got shot.
Interesting note for all you poker players out there.
Mm-hmm. Now, no one knows who brought it in, but a short years after the fort was established, cholera broke out. Now, we've discussed cholera in the past about the what might have been or what might not have been the cause of vampirism or werewolfism.
I
Now,
think more vampires than werewolves.
right, even though the epidemic only lasted a couple of days at the fort, it left somewhere between 75 and 125 dead in its wake. Custer's wife, who was living at the fort at the time, was also when Custer heard of the cholera epidemic, he was out on a military campaign elsewhere. He promptly selected his finest men, turned his command over to another officer, and hightailed it back to the fort as safely as he can. Now, Libby, his wife, was waiting for him, and when he arrived and was in still good health, but Custer's court-martialed for deserting his unit. He was stripped of his command an entire year because of it. Now, we all know when he got his command back in time for a battle at the Little Bighorn, but we all have a place to cover that haunted patch of earth in a future episode.
Now, back at the fort, it is said that the restless victims are to blame for the hauntings that can be found there today. Witnesses do report seeing or hearing a dark group of riders galloping across the fort's parade grounds. We say, or because it varies from person to person. Some people see it, some people hear it. So who knows? You can see it or hear it. Just go. Some will also see the special ride of shadowy horsemen, while others hear the sound of thundering hoofs, voices raised in concern at the jingle jangle bits of the spurs. Strangely, no one has ever experienced both the apparitions and the sounds at the same time. These spectral raiders are believed to be Custer's escort as they race to where their house had stood at the time. One rider, who could possibly be Custer himself, is seen to dismount from his horse and stride towards his home, while the rest of the troops ride away.
Now, the Fort Cemetery has its share of ghosts thanks to the epidemic. General Lewis Armistead, who eventually died at the Battle of Gettysburg, is a frequent specter seen at nights weeping over his wife's grave. She was one of the many victims of the cholera outbreak. It is thought that the general still lingers at there, and his troops were ordered to march off to Fort Riley to escape the cholera epidemic. Unfortunately, they only made it 9 miles before the soldiers themselves began showing symptoms. The day he and his remaining troops limped weakly and wearily back to the fort, Armistead's wife Cornelia took her last breath and died before he could even be reunited with her. Those who witnessed his weeping form leave behind with a distinct feeling that the general wants nothing more than be left alone in his grief.
I don't think he wants to be left alone in his grief. I think he would more want to be reunited with his wife. What do you think?
I think maybe he's left alone with his grief.
So you don't think he ever wants to see his wife again?
I don't think so.
That's kind of heartless.
No, no, not really.
I mean, think about it. If your wife passed away and you never got to see her before she passed, wouldn't you
Mm-hmm.
give anything to see her again?
It all depends.
So heartless.
Yeah, maybe.
I know if my spouse passed, I would definitely want to see them again. And I would be grieving till we were reunited. But I digress. Another
Digress,
color,
digress, digress.
another cholera victim, Miss Susan Fox, lived with her stepfather, but she died alone when her father was away and her fiance was nearby in a town called Conway City. While he was there, he was caring for the sick. Now, Miss Fox herself was married in a wedding dress that she would have worn in their wedding. However, when she passed, she never realized that she was no longer among the living. Now, I say this because the home that had been turned over to new residents were horrified to find Miss Fox herself standing outside and pleading to be let in. Mind you, she's dead, she's buried, she's gone. All of a sudden, you hear a banging at the door. Please let me in. She was
Let
not.
her in, let her in.
She was not only accompanied by the sound of her voice, but with the horrifying shrieks and moans. Now, evidently, the Fort Commandant, tired of the complaints from these people, paid for a nearby padre or priest, as we also know it, to perform an exorcism of the home. However, the sightings and the noises still continued. The house itself was finally burned down to the ground, and this was to discourage the girl from coming back. She no longer waits to be admitted into the home, but she can still be seen on the grounds, still wearing her wedding dress and waiting for someone or something that only she is aware of. Now, do you
See,
think?
burned down the house, and notice the fact she's wearing another woman in white.
Yes, she was buried in her white wedding gown, and it could be possible that she's still looking for that home that they burned down, still
Yep,
wanting to
maybe.
be let in.
Yep, that may be. Now, local lore also speaks of a woman who haunts what is known as Quarters 124. The residence is said to be haunted by the ghost of a woman who drowned herself in a local well, though no one knows why she killed herself. Her name has been lost in time, but she can be heard walking shortly and dragging what sounds like a heavy wooden box behind her up and down the stairs. An exorcism at the residence calmed the spirit for the while, but she was said to have returned a few years later. She has apparently fallen silent again, as has not been reported lately.
So I wonder if she's just finally moved on.
Maybe
Maybe
she got whatever she was inside the box.
What's in the box? What's
What's
in
in
the
the box?
box? Sorry. Yes, maybe she finally got the box open and was able to pass on to another plane of existence. Now, the nearby river claims that a womanly voice can be heard singing a melancholy That word seems hard for me to say tonight. So
Melancholy.
thank you. A sad tune.
Da 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 da.
And this could be heard rolling up the bank, and you know, you can hear it through the thick of the trees. There are two schools of thoughts to where this voice could be coming from. Those who have seen the figure claim that it's a misty, flat barge or ferry that appears, and it seems to be pulled through the waters by a dark, womanly shape. And this seen for a bit before it disappears from view. It's also said that a man who operated the small ferry here in the 1800s had a female indentured person to haul the occupants from one side of the river to the other. Others claim that the haunted voice and figure belong to La Llorona. This is a female spirit that is said to haunt various waterways in the American West. That one is more towards like going down towards the border, I would say, because the La Llorona is a very well-known Mexican folklore, or actually South American folklore. I would love to go into more detail on that in another episode because I find it fascinating. But yes. I definitely don't think she would be that far up north in Kansas. I think she would be more like around from the Texas border on up to the California border. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we're talking about a lady that's probably been in tales told anywhere from South Central up to the southern part of North America.
Makes sense. But this particular one that they're talking about at this river, I think it would be more of possibly, like they said, the indentured servant pulling the barge across the river and not the Llorona. Continue.
Continue. About the stable yards have been known for those on night guard duty, witnessing a soldier on horseback galloping into the first stable building before disappearing from view before reaching the end. When the building itself was renovated, local workers stumbled across a long deceased bones of a horse and rider hidden nearby in a ravine.
Oh, poor horsey.
Yeah, to this day, no one has any idea who the soldier or his mount was or what caused their demise. Was they yet another victim of cholera? Maybe they died out in patrol. Was he a victim of the latest Spanish flu epidemic that raged across the world in the early 19th century or 20th century? Perhaps he and his horse were killed during a skirmish and were left behind where they fell. No one knows for certain except for the apparition himself, and so far he has remained silent about it. Maybe he was on a secret mission. That's why he's been silent about it.
Yes, it's really sad that there was so many victims of the cholera and the Spanish flu, and also skirmishes and battles that happened during this time, that this unknown fallen soldier, we don't know his name. We don't know who he was in life or how he passed. It would be great if there was something in the records to give this man a name and a life, but we just may never know. And maybe that's why he still roams, is because he's trying to get his story out there. He wants people to know he lived and he died.
He died.
Yeah. Now, for the fort itself, it does have more modern ghosts, and we will go ahead and leave those for you to discover on your own. However, there is one that we want to mention. It's the figure of a woman wrapped in chains who walked across the fields late at night. Now, just who is this woman, and why is it that she's wrapped in chains? That is a mystery that no one has yet to figure out again. no one seems to have a feel for just what time period she's from or, when she lived at the fort. Her time for eternal splendor, her eternal slumber is spent on a task that no one seems to know. So again, maybe this is another spirit who there's no records that were kept of this poor woman and what was done to her. And again, she's wanting to get her story out there about the mistreatment she was given by being chained up like this.
Yeah, that is she's just ghostly singing Chain of Fools by Aretha Franklin, mind you.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's working on the chain gang.
Or maybe it's the Chain of Love. Or maybe she's been cursed by Jacob Marley.
Maybe.
Yeah, that if you ever read A Christmas Carol, basically this Jacob Marley says we all carry chains.
Yes.
Now, is anyone getting chills yet? Perhaps we toss another log on fire and cook up some bacon and some beans.
Just make sure if you put chili, there's no beans.
I mean, we could always go out to the car, jack it up, and change the tire.
Just make sure if you make chili, there's no beans. True Texas chili has no beans.
I don't believe that.
Oh, that's what I've always heard. But
No.
speaking of Texas,
Now, how about we wind our way further south to the warmer grounds? Maybe stop in at Alamo. No, those hollow grounds are full of ghosts that we've already gave its own episode. But that's just fine. Texas has more ghost stories where you can shake a stick at.
this is true. Texas.
So let's talk about the governor's mansion. You ever been to the governor's mansion, Kim?
I haven't. I've always wanted to go.
I've actually parked right beside it.
Now, Governor's Mansion, that's in where's that located?
San Antonio.
That's what I thought. But I was like, why would there be a governor's mansion in San Antonio when the capital is in Austin? But you're right. The governor's mansion is in San Antonio. I've never been in it, but we've walked past it several times in our lives.
Yes. Now, because San Antonio was actually the capital of Texas during the time of the Spanish and Mexican withholding. Now, according to reports, the north bedroom is haunted by a ghost of a 19-year-old love-struck young man who was burned by love and shot himself. Surprisingly, even though this happened back in the late 1800s, and his ghostly apparition immediately began making itself known, so no one needs to remember or seems to remember this boy or his relation to the family or the girl he was in love with. Some reports say that this girl was the niece of Governor Murray's wife. Others state the boy was Governor Murray's nephew, which could explain the star-crossed lover's lament, as many no wanted cousins to marry, which seems surprisingly considered back in the day. Cousins marrying cousins was still considered just fine in Texas and many other states. They didn't pass a law against the first cousins marrying each other until 2005. There are even questions if it was actually a gun that the young man used to kill himself. But one thing is certain, all the stories agree upon, is that the tiny guest room was positively bathed in blood. In fact, stories not only say it was downright messy, but the staff also refused to clean it. It wasn't just because of the gore. It seemed that the lover boy, immediately upon his death, started making it known that he was grief-stricken uh, and was unable or unwilling to move on. The body itself wasn't even cold yet, and the doorknobs began rattling. Cold spots were spreading. Banging sounds were soon could be heard, and moans and wails were on repeat. Apparently, years later, another governor, Andrew J. Hamilton, finally had the room sealed off with plaster and mortar to try to keep and muffle that disturbance. But the staff still reported the feelings of dread when working in the northern part of the mansion. Rumors say that the mansion inventory, which left it for each new governor, including a note from the previous governor warning him not to unseal the room. Now, the room was unsealed during the renovation in the early part of the 20th century, and Favorite had it. The poor kid is still moaning and carrying out loud enough to wake the dead. There's nothing quite like pain from your first love, now is there?
Like I said, I've never been in the building, but I can definitely say, we've walked downtown quite a bit, and I remember every time passing the governor's mansion, I always got a sense of sadness from it. And this was ever since I was a little kid, even before I knew it was haunted. But I always felt like something was there. And
Doom and gloom,
yeah,
doom and gloom.
but like I said, I could definitely feel a sadness about the place. And I could feel like something was there. Um again, this is when I was very young, and even before, I had heard the story or the hauntings, but yeah, I'd definitely love to take a tour of the place if possible sometime. And, speaking of which, he's not the only spirit that's still on the government property. There are also two former governors that still reside within. There's Pendleton Mura himself, and he is seen wandering around the mansion. It's as if he cannot leave his former home, even though he actually did flee the grounds and was hiding out in Mexico immediately after the Civil War ended. This could be due to politics, but it could be that, it was a very harsh time back then. And it was just too hard on his health, the way he took off and fled to Mexico after the war. And it was just too hard on his health, and he died very shortly after he got there. So maybe he died too soon. Maybe he really didn't want to leave, and he was forced out by his advisors. And he did miss his old home. Or it could be he felt guilty about that poor kid wailing upstairs, and he blocked off the room so that nobody could hear it. But
Yeah.
who really knows?
No. Now, the famous Texas governor, Sam Houston,
Whoop,
is
whoop.
also said to haunt these hallowed halls. Ousted from the mansion back in 1861 for refusing to swear an oath to the Confederate States. His ghost can be seen around a beautiful four-poster bed and be installed in the southeast bedroom of the mansion. He is
Maybe that's
frequently,
supposed to be he had installed.
well, it says B,
Yeah, but it makes more sense
but four-poster bed that B had installed in the southeast bedroom of the mansion. He is frequently seen but disappears if you try speaking to him. Guess that the governor just wants to have a nap and does not want to be bothered.
Yeah. I don't know. I always thought of Sam Houston as being very, very kind of, quiet, very studious, not really a roughhouser, not really one to cause a scene, more like, that would be more towards Crockett or Bowie. But I always thought of him being, very reserved. So that would make sense that he would want to be left alone, even in death. What do you think?
I think he really wanted to be, he's just tired.
He said he had a long life. That's true.
Yeah.
a lot of war in his life. Now, there is also a poor maid that is known to be looking into the mansion. It's said that she was impregnated out of wedlock, and this was by somebody who lived in the mansion. It could be that she just wants to be back into the mansion, exonerated from her indiscretion. Or maybe she's just waiting for the father to admit that he is the dad and take acknowledgement of his child, and do right for her and the child. Again, we may never know.
We may never know. But maybe you need something a little bit more. All that weeping and wailing. Now, in Bellinger, Texas, there is a Gonzalez restaurant that serves up the Tex-Mex along the side of an outlaw. The outlaw, whose name, like so many others, had been lost to history, ran afoul with the Texas Rangers while running around Ballinger. Who's that name? Because he's ducking into the saloon, the outlaw drew his gun fire and the Rangers fired, killing him instantly. Times change, Prohibition hits, and the saloon becomes a department store and eventually becomes a restaurant. The desperado's newfound notoriety isn't for his old lawless ways, nor is it how he frequently seen within the restaurant in full regalia, making cold spots and moving the salt shakers and the dinnerware around. Apparently, Norton, as the locals call him, is known for saving the place from a fire after the cook left the oven on overnight. It seems he even appeared to the cook since then to remind him not to make that same mistake again, though we have yet to record of either incident. He's also known for walking through the walls in order to spook the inspecting and to give waitresses a pinch on the bottom every now and then.
Well, it does seem like Norton's making the most out of his slice of eternity. Now you got me wanting some enchiladas and some good old Tex-Mex food. Thanks.
We were planning to go up to go across to Lubbock this weekend, but I was hoping for some Texas barbecue instead.
Texas barbecue, Tex-Mex, they're both right up there on my list.
Oh, definitely. So let's go ahead and hang around with the Lone Star State, and let's just hop over to New Mexico, land of enchantment. Take a peek at those spooky haunts. The St. James Hotel in Cimarron, not to be confused with Cimarron, but Cimarron, was built by Harry Lambert in 1872. There's been plenty of shootouts during its heyday, and dining room ceilings still have 22 bullet holes in the ceiling that can be seen even today. Plenty of Wild West outlaws made their way through the Cimarron and St. James itself, including Jesse James, Billy Kidd, and the so-called gentleman gunfighter, Clay Allison, and Bob Ford, the cowardly killer of Jesse James, have said to have done some of its killing on its own property. Buffalo Bill spent time here, as was Annie Oakley and Wyatt Earp, along with a trained bandit known as Black Jack Ketchum. More on Ketchum in a moment.
Little side note. Our great grandmother was Annie Oakley. Or was it a great aunt?
I think you're talking about our great aunt was Belle Starr.
Belle Starr, that's right. Annie Oakley, Belle Starr. I get those two confused, but you're right. I'll
Yes.
probably cut that out then. Did you know, speaking of some of these names that you mentioned here, they're making a Young Guns 3?
Yep.
How are they going to make a Young Guns 3? They all died at the end of Young Guns 2.
It's supposed to take place. It's supposed to go into the Brushy Bill controversy.
Interesting. Have to check that out.
Mm-hmm.
So, visitors.
And of course, you know who's actually coming back.
Who's that?
It's actually coming back with
Emilio
and Chavez.
So it would have to be later in Billy the Kid's life then, because well, no, because Billy the Kid died young, and Emilio is
and
now.
and Kiefer.
Yeah, but they're all old now. How can they play their characters that they played when they were young? The Kid died, I think, before he was 30, and he's now in his 60s.
Brushy Bill was in his 80s when he
Now, is this the controversy that Billy the Kid actually wasn't killed?
Mm-hmm. There's actually 3 or 4 different people. They Brushy Bill's the closest, but there's actually 3 or 4 different people that step forward and say, "I'm Billy the Kid."
Interesting. I'd like to check that out. But we have gotten way off topic. I apologize with my ADHD. We were talking about the St. James Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, continuing on with the St. James Hotel, visitors can stay in rooms named after these notorious guests. But yet it's mostly the victims that still haunt the place. The St. James boasts that there are more than 26 murders within its walls, and none of the dearly departed want to leave. Most actively in the hotel is haunted by the gambler T.J. Wright, and he was murdered after revealing a winning hand at poker. And he tried to claim the hotel as part of his winnings. The current owners talk about hearing the sounds of party atmosphere in the lobby. This includes people talking, glasses clinking, but nobody is seen. The sound does seem to appear, the sound seems to disappear when the owner approaches. Not wanting to interrupt, the owner claims that she told the ghostly group, "I'm glad you're having a good time. I'm glad you're here for a party. Please leave everything as good as you found it, if not better." With that, she turned and walked away. And as she did so, the party resumed. Now, she was pretty convinced that if it wasn't Mr. Wright celebrating his winnings, perhaps it was some other former clients out for an evening of fun.
Now, the hotel itself has a series of renovated rooms, allowing a museum-like atmosphere, with photographs hanging in the halls for more notorious clientele. The owners claim that most of the spooky action can be laid at the feet of 3 spirits, though we aren't quite sure what they have common up to this information. T.J. Wright, winner of the Deadly Hand, is known for locally as simply as 18. However, census readings show that he was still alive and kicking in Albuquerque long after his supposed lives. 18 can apparently be quite testy, for the owners now keep his room locked with a vase of flowers sitting in front of the door to keep guests from trying to take a peek. 18 is said to have retailed against the
Retaliated.
Howlers, retaliated, allowing their chef to stay overnight in rooms to try and catch a glimpse of the gambler. His revenge, apparently one owner, Pet Birch, was found dead the next morning, although an autopsy on its tiny corpse revealed that there was no cause of death. Stories say, however, that whenever the 18 gets out of hand, that the chef is often sent to his room, as 18 simply seems to like the guy, and the chef is the only one who gets the wily spirit to calm down.
Now, what I'm wondering is, could this be 2 different things? It could either be one, that after TJ Wright died, his spirit returned to the hotel because of the fact of he enjoyed it there. I mean, he wanted to take the hotel in his winnings, so obviously he liked the place. So maybe after his death in Albuquerque, he went back. Or it could be, what do you call it? When a ghost is created by people's stories, and it's like the stories create the entity.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be either one of those threes. What do you think?
Good.
Now, for the chef, of course, I mean, talk about job security. You know they ain't gonna fire you if 18 likes you.
Yep.
We also have Mary, and this spirit was named after Mary Lambert. She was the wife of the original owner. She is said to live in her old room and will sometimes venture out into the hallways, but mostly you will only know that she's there from the scent of her distinct perfume. And this comes and goes. She also makes herself known to the guests by staying in her room. And she likes to have her windows closed. So, you know, if you are trying to open them, she tries to keep them shut. So it's a struggle to open them. If you do succeed in opening them, however, she will start rapping at the room's second story window, insisting that you close the windows. And this will continue on until the window is shut completely. However, in gratitude, she will reduce the temperature in the room to accommodate if you ask her to. Now, again, the perfume that could be, I don't know, could be somebody walking by and their scent lingers, and then you come in and you smell it and you think, oh, that must be Mary. It would depend on how distinct that smell is, that you could say that, oh, well, nobody here wears that scent. I mean, how do you really know? Are you going to go knocking on every door? Excuse me, are you wearing this perfume? Excuse me, do you have this hint of lavender in your perfume? Or maybe it's a hint of I don't know, give me another scent. Gardenias.
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
Who knows? But with now earlier we did mention about the known gunfighting outlaw Black Jack Ketchum. Well, his tale is right hard to swallow. It seemed Thomas Ketchum and his brother Sam decided the life of crime was more to their liking than being honest men. At first, they stayed in their native Texas, breaking in and looting stores at night and basically just making trouble before they moved into robbing payroll trains across the New Mexico territory.
Now, you did miss the third imp, which is
I did miss it. Let me go back and take a look at that imp because
yes.
the third spirit, the imp, is apparently a practical joker who likes to adjust lamps, make off with pens and calculators, and pull jars of pickles from the shelves and roll them out over the kitchen. Now, the imp is said to have only been seen once by a newly hired 15-year-old boy. This poor teen was sent to vacuum the carpets at the bar, and he looked up to see a dwarf sitting at the bar, his feet propped up on a neighbor's stool and laughing at the boy. The boy was so unnerved he went straight home, got his mother, and had her stand nearby to make sure that the dwarf, of whom she couldn't see, didn't do anything more than just sit there. As soon as the boy finished the task he assigned to him, that day he promptly quit, never to return to that hotel.
Now, 15-year-old boy
Mm-hmm.
sees a spirit nobody else has seen.
Yep.
Do you really think he saw the spirit? Or do you think working was harder than what he thought it would be and was looking for a way out of that job?
Oh, we're talking about lazy kids these days, right?
You never know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's always been lazy kids. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it, it's human nature. But we can't say for sure if the St. James is truly haunted.
Right.
However, there have been many paranormal investigators that were brought in. You know, it just seems a bit odd that none of these so-called sightings happened until after it was purchased in 1985.
Mm-hmm.
However, what do we know? We can
We know
honestly
nothing.
admit we know nothing. But we can honestly admit that we have yet to set foot in the place to see for ourselves. Again,
Yeah.
publicity stunt, actual hauntings. Things that make you go,
Things to make you go,
Now, getting back to old Ketchum, Blackjack Ketchum.
Yep.
Now, these brothers had no problem shooting those who either got in their way or the posse that was sent to hunt them down. They spent time as part of their own gang, with members coming and going as they pleased. There was even a time where they joined up with Butch Cassidy and the Hole in the Wall boys.
Mm-hmm.
The brothers went separate ways from time to time, but they always seemed to find one another again. It does seem, though, on one of their separations that Sam and some boys tried to repeat the success of the Atchinson's, Topeka, and Santa Fe payroll train. And there was a shootout that occurred. Sam was wounded in the shoulder, and slowly the gang, Sam was wounded in the shoulder, and it slowed the gang down. So he left for a local ranch where the posse eventually found him. He ended up dying shortly after from lead poisoning, and this caused an infection.
Yep, it could have, like I said, it could have happened to anybody.
But it happened to good old Sam.
Mm-hmm. Sam, who had shot in the shoulder and died of lead poisoning. Yeah, now, Blackjack, who had earned his name by once being mistaken for another outlaw by the name of Blackjack, either did not know of his Sam's demise or was out there wanting to seek revenge. But he did, however, try to ambush the same rail line at the very same water exchange that his brother had and did on his own, with basically the same resort. The conductor, now weary of bandits, was armed and managed to shoot Blackjack in the elbow, knocking him clean off the saddle. Upon reaching town, the conductor informed the local posse where he had last seen Blackjack, and sure enough, the next morning, Blackjack was still lying there next to the tracks and slowly bleeding out. Now, Blackjack was tossed onto a back of a horse and hauled off to be treated. During that time, he winds up having his arm amputated and is allowed to recuperate while awaiting his trial. My gosh, this sounds like the worst outlaw ever. Now, unsure of what to do with his bandits, the locals decided the best thing to do is to simply hang the man. But hey, at least they gave him time to recover from his wounds first.
Well, yeah, I mean, cruel and unlawful punishment.
Yeah,
You can't just torture the guy, so you got to take care of him before you kill him.
I
You don't want him
know.
to suffer.
Yeah, suffer, suffer, suffer.
The evening before his hanging, the locals decided to test a giblet that they had slapped together. I'm sorry, gibbet, not giblet. Giblets are on foods, some kind of food. As one had never legally been hung in the territory before. You can hardly blame them for wanting to test it out and make sure everything was right. And, you had 150 tickets sold to this hanging. So you want to make sure everything goes right so people get what they paid for.
Mm-hmm. Some people used to bring lunches.
Mm-hmm. Now, the stiff rope used was not the right kind. But poor Blackjack.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Like I said, this is coming out to turn out to be the worst outlaw ever.
He had taken advantage of these regular feedings that they were giving him and exercising while he recovered. So good for Blackjack. They're going to let you heal up. So take advantage of that. Eat well, exercise, get yourself healthy. And so anyway, during this time, he did gain some weight, and, they tested the line with about 215 pounds of sack tied to the rope because they're thinking, He's got away about that much by now. Sure enough, when they were testing with the bag of sand, the trapdoor opened like it was supposed to, and the rope held. They were really satisfied that this was looking well for for the people coming to watch this hanging. And, they headed home, happy as clams, but they failed to untie the heavy weight from the rope. So, it was still there, swaying in the wind that kicked up the oncoming rainstorm.
Now, if you think that the rain was going to stop a hanging, guess again. The following morning, Blackjack ate his final breakfast and gently told the sheriff they need to get a move on as he wanted to reach hell in time for supper. He even joked with the crowd as he's bound up the stairs to awaiting news, telling him that be sure they bury me deep, boys. Now, there was a bit of a wait once he'd reached the top of the scaffold as he asked for the black hood, which had procured and removed once the hangman realized the extremity of the stiff rope, now freed of its bag, could hardly be bent to loop over his head. Poor Blackjack's head covered had to be removed while the men struggled to get his head in the noose. By the time the black's noose was back on his head, or black hood, I'm sorry, Blackjack was more than ready to go. Let her rip, he shouted. And so they did.
And rip it did, meaning the rope. Stiff as wire was not only too long for someone of Blackjack's height, but it had to cleanly snap his neck. So when you hang, basically, the rope's supposed to snap your neck, and that's how you die.
Yep.
However, this didn't happen.
Nope.
Instead, onlookers were stunned to see the body land cleanly on its feet, standing there for a couple of minutes, swaying like a dizzy, before collapsing to the ground. And the rip? Sadly to say, that was poor Blackjack's head being ripped clear off his body.
Oh, almost like Saddam Hussein.
You see, freed from the weight of the body, the head was caught within the black hood that that now became essentially a bag holding it. And it bounced on the end of the line with enough force to launch it back in the air. This went through the trapdoor and landed neatly on the planks for all the world to see as the bag grew dark with the blood. Witnesses all looked in horror as the body finally collapsed and spewed out crimson fountain of blood. Blackjack's head sat jauntily on the platform as if it had decided that at the last minute, no, it would rather not meet back up with the remains below.
Boy, that sound nice.
Mm-hmm. Still want that Tex-Mex?
Yeah, sure do.
That Rock Texas barbecue?
Oh, yeah. Did he blink, looking through blind eyes at the darkness when the hood? No one knows. It is said he died instantly, but witnesses from beheadings by the guillotine have long claimed that the eyes blink and moving lips with words that no longer have a voice to speak.
Yeah, it's the nerves jerking.
Mm-hmm.
The crowd certainly did get their money's worth that day, and the town made sure to photograph the headless corpse lying it beneath the gibbet where it had landed. Now, this is the interesting part, or more like morbid part.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Well,
images.
This is not.
Well,
This is
pretty morbid. They actually sold those pictures as a macabre souvenir on postcards.
okay.
So how would you like that? You're sending out your postcard. Say you have your relative in New York and you're sending them a postcard. Dear Aunt so-and-so, Loving it here in town. Hope you are well. And then on the back of the foot is a picture of this body. How macabre or morbid is that?
It's kind of it's having a wonderful time. Wish you were here.
That's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah.
All right. So poor Blackjack went down in history for several reasons, not just for his head's outstanding acrobatics and performance, but because he was the last person to be sentenced to hang by his peers in New Mexico territory. He is also known as the only outlaw to hang anywhere for merely trying to rob a train.
Yes, it turns out that several years later, New Mexico, when it became a state, the sentence of poor Blackjack was actually determined to be illegal. But there was no way to like bring justice about it because he had been long since dead.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I mean, was Sam his only relative? Do you not have any other relatives that they could have paid retributions to for this happening to poor Sam?
Sam had died
I mean,
previously.
I'm sorry, not Sam, Blackjack. I mean, I'm sure something could have been done if he had some family left over.
Yeah. So, who knows? But at
Yes.
least the town paid for his head to be stitched on after the clothes were taken, so the curious townsfolk could look on his dead body decently in one piece. Which is ironic considering that they dismembered him for burial, making it easier to carry his heavy corpse up to the grave while waiting on top of the hill.
My gosh, that poor Blackjack.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is the worst
Now,
outlaw.
while this was gruesome, does it truly count as a ghost story? Well, there just so happens to be a person who claims that they've seen poor Blackjack since his death. Maybe he was looking for his head. Maybe he was looking for
Maybe.
other parts of his body.
Where's my head? Where's my head?
This testimony did come from a 14-year-old Boy Scout.
Oh,
And
you can always trust Boy Scouts.
right. It seems that the Philmont Scout Ranch contained with its borders one of Blackjack's old hideouts. In many years since his death, the ranch became the place where scouting groups from all over came for weeks of hiking, camping, and wilderness training. It was on one of these outings that the master told the stories of Blackjack upon their hike in the cave. The cave itself turned out to be rather disappointing, and there was nothing left inside but rocks, once used as a campfire. I still think it would be cool to check out the cave, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
However, for these poor campers, it was more disheartening that the scoutmaster insisted that the boys camp at a designated campsite rather in the hideout. I can understand that being a disappointment, man.
Yeah.
I'd be like, let's camp here. However,
No, kids. We don't want to. There may be bats. Definitely bats.
or bears,
Or bears. Or wolves.
or mountain
pumas.
lions. Yeah, mountain lions.
Yeah. Pumas.
Pumas, mountain lions, wherever you're at. I forget what we call them here in Texas. But I digress. If you know what they call them in Texas again, let me know, because I know it's not a mountain lion, it's something else.
Puma.
No, pumas somewhere else. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. If you know, leave in the comments, or if I find out, I'll leave it in the comments. But boys being boys, a group of the scouts did wait until their other scouts fell asleep. And they grabbed their bags and they snuck off to spend the night in the cave.
Mm-hmm. Stump Scoutmaster.
They woke up a few hours later upon hearing noises coming from the brush outside the cave. Again, could have been mountain lions, could have been bats, bears, wolves, coyotes. But they heard noises in the brush outside. Now they had lit a fire and the coals had burned low. So they watched, according to them, a cowboy came running out from behind the cover of the trees lit by the full moon. Part of him
Mhm.
did seem solid, but in other parts, the boys could see right through his body parts. That can be, hey, they dismembered the poor guy. That makes sense why
Right,
part of him was solid, part of him wasn't.
right,
Um,
I dismember you.
but, the boys watched in horror as the man grew newer and, you know, they could not move or make a sound, basically. They were so freaked out by all of this.
Mhm. So, the story goes that in the moonlight, the terrified scouts could clearly see a man's face and clothing, and the man drew near that the boys could even see the yellowing of his teeth as he looked back in the direction he had just come from. A revolver at the man's hand shone in the light as the scouts heard voices shouting just out of sight. The sounds of gunfire filled the air with figures left off 6 shots in return before running towards the terrified scout. Another shot rang out, and the apparition clutched his arm and came a stop next to the boy, seeming unaware of the scouts camping there. The phantom managed to empty the spent shell casings from his gun and had just begun reloading before his final casting hit the boy's sleeping bag and disappeared from sight. That could have been Sam. Once again, the ghost began firing into the trees while the boy stared in horror as the bloody dripping hole from his man's spectral shoulder.
That would have been Sam, because Sam was shot
Yep,
in the shoulder. Um, the blackjack was shot in the elbow.
elbow.
Yeah. So yeah, so they didn't even see blackjack. They saw
It's
Sam.
all Sam.
Now, something about the scout apparently caught the man's attention, and he spun his revolver raised to the boy's head. After a few moments of silence, the scout watched as the man lowered his gun in confusion, and he said, "You're not supposed to be here." And then he disappeared. The scout, too frightened, and not believing what he had just saw, maybe he had dreamt the entire episode, remained awake for hours before he was able to go back to sleep. By the time the sun came up, his companions had to shake him to get him awake, and then they had to sneak back to their tents to the camp. He managed to get
Mhm.
his story out of what just happened in the night while the boys began rolling their sleeping bags, making sure that their campfire was extinguished. As our scout moves up, I'm sorry, as our scout, tongue, as our scout moves to roll up his sleeping bag, he spots 6 shell casings the cowboy had dropped laying in the dirt beside him.
Mm,
Interesting.
yeah. The fellow scouts accused him of playing a big joke on him, but no one thinks much of it when the boy gathers up the spent casings and sneak back into camp. It's a couple of weeks before the boys' time at the ranch had come to an end, and they headed back home. Our scout is there, able to look up a picture of what Black Jack Ketchum looked like. Surprised, the image showed the very man the boy claims had pointed a gun to his head. At some point, he shows the casings to a friend's father, who happened to be an antique weapons expert. Stunned, the expert confirms the casings were indeed from the 1800s. The type of gunpowder used back then was apparently a different mix than what is used today, and the scent from the original gunpowder is still strong on the casings themselves. He is then told by expert that no one has ever seen old spent casings look like in mint condition, like these were.
Again, though, if Blackjack and Sam were brothers, they would. I mean, it's very possible that they look very similar. I
Hmm.
mean, I've been told that I look a lot like you, and I've been told I look a lot like Scott. So, being related, it is very possible that he got Sam mixed up with Blackjack, especially if he was like that terrified. I mean,
Hmm.
you don't get a good look and you just see somebody who looks like them and you're like, oh, that's who it was. But I still say Sam. He was shot in the shoulder. It was Sam.
Yep.
Um, now the scout does claim that he kept the casings hidden away. However, after he moved out of his parents' house, his mother does come across them and throw them away. Question now. Is our
Yes.
scout is our scout telling the truth? Or is this just another tall tale to come out of the West? After all, ghost stories do have a way of sprouting up and taking on a life of their own. But the scout, unlike other such yarns, does not hesitate to name himself in the account when he wrote it up years later. Take it or leave it, he doesn't really seem to care. But that does say a lot that he hasn't tried making money or earning any notoriety off his own story.
Yep. Now, as we're going tired to Mexico, how about we hop over the border to Utah? Turns out, in what could be an episode, it's all that own the states of Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico, connected by a north-south highway known as 491. Locals, how still remember. Locals, however, still remember the road as its original denomination, Highway 666. Renamed in 1993 as the road signs kept being stolen by pranksters. The so-called Devil's Highway was the spur from its original Highway 666, had its name also changed to 491 in 2003.
Now, the highway's more recent claims include another girl in white, lady in white.
We have so many of those.
Yes, and she's said to travel along the desolate desert roads and disappears when motorists pull over to offer her a ride. It's also said that skinwalkers are said to appear as wild animals in the road. These skinwalkers force the drivers to swerve and crash. Or are they real animals just, driving along, they see the headlights, they freeze like a deer in the headlights? What do you think?
Deer with headlights.
Now, should the driver manage to keep his wheels on the road, this skinwalker would appear in their back seat. Okay, so maybe it's not a deer caught in the headlights as they appear in the back seat, and this, does seem to terrify the driver, and they have a horrible accident. You also got your UFO stories. I also talk about hellhounds with sharp teeth, glowing glowing yellow eyes. Again, what color are a dog's eyes when the lights hit it? Come on, people, think about it. Hellhounds with sharp teeth, coyotes, wolves, hello. But people also report that they lose chunks of time. Some even go to say that they're unseen for days. Eventually, they end up reaching their destination with no idea how they've gotten there and don't even realize that they were listed among the missing people. So I bet you're asking yourself, why are we mentioning this? Well, stories of the highway even predate the highway itself. This includes rumors of horrific happenings going back to pioneer times. Curious now? You want to know more? Let us know, and maybe we'll go into depth on a later episode about the infamous Highway 666.
Now, you would think that a state that's constantly remembering by its religion that settled it, that the stories around the Great Lake, Salt Lake, would be somehow not supernaturally spooky. But yet, they are. Two distinct stories come to mind. Firstly, Antelope Island, which sits within the lake itself. The island, now though a state park, was originally settled by rancher Fielding Garr, with structures still standing dating back to 1848. The building that still stands are said to be fairly creepy, but the woods between the ranch and the shoreline can actually hold a paranormal in thrall. Stories are often rumored of the ranch hand who like to hunt children, hurt children, though they certainly have yet to be verified. Other investigations believe that the haunting in the woods is more modern in occurrences and not all related to the rancher or his families. Within these trees, however, dark shapes have been seen moving, and within you will stumble across a depression in the ground with a great rock in the middle, almost as if the stone has been forcibly pulled into the earth. At some point, someone built a bench by the depression, and if you stay there too long, mysterious scratches will appear on you. The moment they do, it is said that negative energies attach and start making you feel sick. But shapes in the trees are not uncommon out in Antelope Island, which shows and holds a lot of diverse wildlife, including the largest forms of bison and antelope. Small noises and moving branches without wind are often said to be simply be porcupines or hunting owls. However, this alone isn't what makes Antelope Island that spooky.
Now, in 1862, a drifter wandered into town and he found work as a grave digger. Turns out that Jean Baptiste was robbing the bodies of those he was supposed to be looking over. And he would bury their clothes and jewelry. I'm sorry, he was supposed to be burying their clothes and jewelry, but he was taking it for himself. It took years before he was finally discovered. And upon his arrest, the authorities found his home filled with caskets that were broken into, and he used them as kindling. Hundreds of children's clothes and shoes were stacked in piles, though Baptiste had, you know, was, I'm sorry, Baptiste and his simpleton common law wife had no kids of their own. Sorry, I lost my track there. There was also funeral suits found and jewelry. Anything that he dug up made its way into its filthy hovel of a home. The bodies simply tumbled naked into the cold black earth. Now, as punishment, the police branded the words, "I robbed graves," onto Baptiste's forehead, and both of his ears were severed before he was banished from society and hauled out to Antelope Island. Again, cruel and unusual punishment, people.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez. Anyway, so they left him alive, they branded him, took his ears, and threw him on the island. And the severity of these injuries were due to the sheriff was so mad because he just buried his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And this caused a revulsion in him at what Baptiste had done. So that's the reason that, the sheriff did such a cruel, unusual punishment on him. Because, it could have been it was very inevitable that Baptiste, yes, had done this to the sheriff's daughter's grave. So, that plus the anger that the families had gotten due to finding out that Baptiste did this to their family members in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they claimed that they did such a horrific thing to Baptiste.
Just leaving a little bit of darkness in there. Little sounds of silence.
Yes.
So why did they banish him to Antelope Island? One story says that he was left with two brothers on the Antelope Island who were to row him to a nearby Fremont Island. The two brothers had some cattle out there in Fremont and were familiar with the rocky approach. Another version is the authorities left him on Antelope Island, but the drought that year lowered the level of the lake enough for Baptiste to wade back to mainland.
It really isn't that surprising, thinking of the lake dropping of that far.
Mm-hmm.
At the highest levels, the lake is only about 14 to 33 feet deep. So
Yep.
with such shallow waters, the lake levels can quickly change temperature as it fluctuates. Um, there's not much water left exposed to the air for evaporating. So, version one does claim that Baptiste was quickly spotted upon reaching the mainland and then hauled out even further into the lake to Fremont Island, which is a far more remote and, not as nearby with resources that they may have available before.
Now, basically, whichever you hear, Baptiste was eventually left on Fremont, which is a desolate rock with nowhere to hide on its exposing rocky surface except for a small shack that was falling apart.
A few weeks later, the authorities did go out to check on Baptiste, and they found his rough shelter dismantled with a slaughtered cow nearby. But there was no signs of the man himself. It seemed that maybe Baptiste had tried to leave, as part of the shack could be used to build a raft.
Mm-hmm.
However, that didn't make sense because somehow Baptiste had found and killed a cow before he scaled and filleted it. He would have had food to get by with, but none of it had been eaten. Did he perhaps realize that he had no way out and no way to cook the item before it raw? I'm sorry. And he just didn't want to eat it raw. He could have tried to preserve it, using the salty lake to brine and cure it. But, his limited resources of fresh water would have made it difficult to choke the meal down to begin with.
Woo! Now, unable to swim and the waters around Fremont too deep for him to cross from, something either took Baptiste or he risked his life trying to escape. Must have been sudden, or surely he would have taken some sort of the meat with him. Strangely enough, although the authorities had searched the island thoroughly, it wasn't until years later that a skeleton wearing a ball and chain irons were found on the island. By this time, no one remembered if Baptiste had been left wearing leg irons or whether they abandoned him out there. But what had body was found when authorities landed.
Perhaps he had somehow found a place to hide and then eventually died. No one really knows for sure. As the body itself, well, there were no carnivores on the island. So how is it that the body in the leg irons was at one end of the island, while his skull was 6 miles away on the far side of the island? Did the shepherd's brother take revenge on Baptiste for the death of their cow? If that was the case, you would think they would have collected the meat, though the cow's hide was never found. Skinwalker. How Baptiste somehow managed to skin and fillet the carcass is anyone's guess. Given the lack of records from the time, there was no one who can even say what happened to the remains that were found. Were they buried? With or without his head? Stories all insist that Baptiste was alive and sporting his head when he was left on Fremont. So what then removed it, and why? Was it a skinwalker? Was it an alien?
Or with the freshly slaughtered cow nearby, what predator would even want to remove the head, let alone go trotting off with it? Again, there are no predators on the island except for wild birds, and a bird would have gone first for the eyes and then through the sockets into the brain. There was no need for someone to remove and then carry the head off elsewhere. By the time the body broke down enough for the head to have been attached, all soft tissue would have left been long gone, and therefore no interest to birds or even the carnivores.
Could it be possible that there were high winds that maybe blew through and broke the head off the skeleton and carried it through the brush?
Maybe.
It seemed the body itself wasn't scattered about, but it looked as if it had just laid down and expired. Hungry birds pulling flesh from the bone would have spread the remains around a bit. Stories insist that the body and skull didn't even seem to belong to one another, given there was a difference in sizing, and which really messes the story up. However, regardless of where you hear it, all insist that Baptiste did indeed exist and was sentenced to die of exposure on the barren hunk of rock. Okay, so that's really interesting that if you look at the head and the body, it's possible that they could be of separate people. So where's Baptiste's head? And where's the body to the head they found?
That's
That
true.
makes it even more interesting.
Yes, but maybe you could roll out and ask him yourself, as the ghost seems still be wandering the shores of the island. Thankfully, still wearing his head.
I was wondering about that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he is doomed to wait out Judgment Day to find out where his blackened soul's fate lies.
All right. Well, maybe. Now, while partners, the fire has died down and the coals of marshmallows and cocoa have long disappeared. It's time to come to wind things down for the evening. Catch up with us next time and we'll discuss all the fun ins and outs of the flat earth conspiracy.
Maybe you'll drift off to sleep safe tonight,
Mm-hmm.
sleeping calm and soundly. But we'd rather think not. If you liked these stories and you'd like to hear more, leave us a comment below and let us know which was your favorite story. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, we ask that you rate us. We do like 5 stars, as Rick is pointing out here. How many stars? Count them out for us.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes, we do like 5 stars, but you'll take what you give us. If you're able to, also leave us a review, as we do read reviews on air. And yeah, what are your thoughts of the stories, Rick? Which is your favorite ones?
My favorite story?
Mhm.
Blackjack.
Poor Blackjack.
Yes.
He just went through the ringer.
Yep.
Yes. These were definitely a little darker than the stories we read last episode. Again, we will link that. I would have to say I do like the story of the little dwarf sitting there watching the kid clean the floor. Would have been even more interesting if the dwarf was like, "You missed a spot."
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful night. We look forward to you joining us again for the Flat Earth conspiracies.
Yes.
And sweet dreams, everybody.
And unpleasant nightmares.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.